So my topic is mom and pop journalism in the digital age. You may be wondering what that means. So chapter 1, I call Awe and Shock. Now many of you are familiar with the phrase shock and awe, but when I got into the writing game, it was definitely awe and shock, and I'll tell you why. It starts with my papa's papa, my grandpa. My grandpa was, and this is the awe part, a very important man. He was the president of the American Academy of Dermatology. But he's an author. He was what I think maybe was the first author in my family. And my dad was a great reader, and we had one of these bookshelves, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Anyway, I look up on the upper shelves, and I see a book with my name, surname on it, Weiss. And it's way up high. I wonder, why is that so high? It's out of my reach. And I climb up on the bookshelf, and it was not bolted to the wall. I nearly toppled the thing on top of myself. And I pulled the book down, and the title is a word I had never seen before, and I cannot pronounce. My grandpa wrote the book on syphilis. So that's the shock part. So I go through, and there are two things that had a profound impact on me. Although I was, maybe 9 years old, I could tell that my grandfather had made a contribution to society. They had discovered that penicillin works. This was a great contribution. You can actually find this on Amazon.com. And you notice, I don't know if you can read this here. It says, "Be the first to review this item." Guess who provided a review a couple days ago? I called it a seminal work. Chapter 2, take me out to the ball game. This was my team, St. Louis Cardinals. You may notice 4 people down, that's Stan Musial. He was my hero, my role model. And you can see that I'm on my way. All right, but one day I bring home this report card. I don't know if you can see from the back of the room, but there's a certain consistency in the marks. M in reading, M in oral language, M in writing, M in arithmetic, M in written language, and this was before everybody was above average. All those M's stood for medium, mediocre. And you'll notice something that presages a career in journalism, also average social adjustment. And I've cut off the teacher's comment because it was a little too raw. So my mother, she gets this report card and she is very upset. And she says, "What's going on here? You're better than this." And I said, "Mom, don't worry about it. I'm going to be a big league baseball player." So these marks don't count. I mean, does anybody ask Alex Rodriguez about what his grades in grade school? No, I don't think so. So, you've heard of these people who, they say, speak truth to power, right? My mother had this gift for speaking truth to small children. And she said, "Dickie, I have seen you play baseball, and if I were giving you marks for playing baseball, they wouldn't even approach these." Oh, breaks my heart. So, chapter 3, I call this Taken to the Cleaners. So, this is my dad, Richard Weiss. He had a manual typewriter, and he would write stories. He wrote, I always like to say, he wrote for the finest journals in the land. He wrote for the New Yorker, he wrote for the Atlantic, he wrote for Harper's. They didn't publish anything he wrote, but he'd send them one manuscript after another. And he would sit in front of the typewriter, and he made it sound like a machine gun. He was so fast, and then he'd throw that carrot over to the right, and he'd type some more, and then he'd throw it again. And it was just such a neat sound. Now, I think I might want to do that. And those are in the foreground are his rejection letters. There are some others. But my dad worked nights. I actually did not see him much during the week I'd have to stay up till 10:30. Actually, you could time it. He would come in right when Johnny Carson finished his monologue. And so we had the weekends together, and of course, certain things had to get done on the weekends. One of them was going to the cleaners. This cleaners in particular, some of you, how many of you know Marquardt's? You know that it's a kind of a, what you call an upscale cleaners. I just checked the prices just this morning for this, did research for this speech. And a shirt at Marquardt's is, a laundered shirt is $3.50. And it's kind of $2 1/4 for everybody else. And my mother used to send everything to Marquardt's. We would, tons of stuff. And when she died, we sent Marquardt's a sympathy card. At any rate, he would take me to Marquardt's, and if I was good, here's another. If I was good and patient, he would then take me to Howard Johnson's, where we would have ice cream sodas. And we would talk about what life would be like if somehow I did not make it to the major leagues. And my father, in a very subtle way, groomed me to be a writer. And what he did, you know, you've seen probably the movie The Great Santini and all these dads who are like, you gotta be this or you gotta be that. It would, of course, have given him great pleasure if I would be a writer. But it was just a possibility. And I think what good parents do is give their kids a sense of possibility. Okay? So I was really interested in continuing that tradition, and I had 3 girls. And so I would take them to the cleaners. Now you notice we're over here at Clayton Cleaners, where a shirt is $2.25, because my mother's profligate spending on liberal Democrats, this is all we could afford. Now you will notice that one child there, the one on, let's see, the right, looks as if, yes, let's just check this out. Yes, she's giving what you would call the finger to the photographer, who happened to be me. Now, it isn't what you think this is, because something happened at the cleaners that involves a finger. Here she's reenacting here. She takes a cigarette lighter and says, oh, it's kind of orange and glowing. I think I'll stick my finger in it. And she did. Here's a little closer up shot. We really went all the way with this. And I get back in the car, and I notice she's sitting on her hands. And I said, anything going on? No, Dad, just take me over to my friend Adina's house, and everything's fine. 20 years later, she tells me the story about how she gets out of the car, runs into the house, which, by the way, is the home of our rabbi, and reports that she's self-immolated. And so this is the legacy that I'm trying to pass on. Okay. So now we go on to chapter 4, which I'm calling the mamas and the papas. So I got kind of fixated, as you might imagine, on in my journalism and doing profiles, and I did many on many people. One was on Terry and Alan Millman, who did Library Limited, and I asked them about it. Who's your mama? Who's your papa? And they told me some very interesting stories. There was Richard Barron, who I'll talk a little bit more about later, a developer, and then there was Maxine Clark. So of course, I had to ask Maxine, I have to get my other glasses here, about her mom and dad, and what was it about the way she was raised that had an influence on the kind of person that she became. And so if you'll indulge me, I will read a little bit of what I wrote. And it starts off kind of sad, believe it or not. This is an excerpt. Clark's own teddy bear story is kind of grim. His name was Teddy, of course, and he had been with Maxine since birth in Coral Gables, Florida. Wherever Maxine went, Teddy was sure to follow, except on the day the family went to Grandma's Kitchen. Maxine, that's a restaurant, by the way, right? Maxine, then about 10, left Teddy in the back seat of the station wagon. While she was eating at Grandma's, he was snatched. Maxine and her parents looked everywhere, driving back and forth from home to the restaurant. Mom and Dad shrugged. She'd just have to go on growing up without him. 30 years later, Maxine found what happened to Teddy at her 40th birthday party. Her former neighbors, the Hales, presented her a new stuffed bear and confessed that Maxine's father had put out a contract on Teddy that they had fulfilled. Maxine's father thought she needed to grow up. Opening a chain of teddy bear stores might seem like sweet revenge, but a lot of the drive and motivation comes from Maxine's mother. Although Ann Castleman has been dead 26 years, and I guess it's now many more years than that, 40 years, Maxine says she talks to her mom each morning when she's getting ready for work. A picture of mother and teenage daughter sits on Maxine's dressing table. I'm not sure if this is a picture, but here is a picture.
That's it.
Is that right? Oh, cool. Maxine looks cheerful. Anne looks as if she's got things sized up and is figuring out what to do next. Maxine says the world was black or white to her mother. If you didn't see things her way, well, you could hardly carry on a conversation with her. She was upfront and frank with Maxine, sharing confidences as if Maxine were an adult. In Ann Castleman's opinion, you were put on earth to help other people, to use your brain, to make your mark. Otherwise, what's the point? Ann worked at a home for retarded children as a manager and fundraiser. These kids ought to be using their brains too, she believed, so she made sure the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts organized troops for them. If Ann had her way, Maxine might have become a social worker and had children. But Maxine was a product of the 1960s, when young women began moving out of the nurturing jobs into arenas where they had a chance to run the show. Still, Maxine shared her mother's zeal. She was going to change the world somehow. Otherwise, what's the point? In the fall of that year, I got very interested in a story that came to be called The Better Place to Grow Up. And it was about an effort by Richard Barron to help children at Jefferson School, which is just west of downtown. And Richard was a developer. He led an effort to invest several $million in that school, and over a period of 6 years in 7 schools in all. And I found my way to a teacher by the name of Mary Spencer, and that's her. And a classroom, as I call them, a gaggle of kids. And one of them is here tonight, Avita Caldwell, if you will stand. And there were a few dozen others. And I wrote a series, those ran 4 parts. And it got me some nice recognition, and the story was very hopeful. Okay, now let us fast forward. 2 years ago, I get an email from Avita, and she says, I don't know if you remember me, Mr. Weiss, but I was in that class you wrote about, and I want to write a story in appreciation of my teacher, Mary Spencer, and I was hoping you could help me get it into the Beacon. And I said, well, sure, that's great. And her piece ran, and I thought that was terrific. I saw Richard Barron. I said, you should know that one of those kids turned out really great. She got a communications degree from St. Louis University. Okay, now let's fast forward to about 4 or 5 months ago. I get another email from Avita, and she says, Mr. Weiss, I'm wondering if you can help me. I'm 2 years out of school now, and I haven't been able to find a job in journalism. And can you help me find an internship? And I said, well, Avita, what are you doing now? She said, well, I'm a pharmacy assistant at Walgreens. I'm making $10 an hour. And I'm thinking, I've quit that job, and I'm just not sure what I'm going to do. I said, well, let's meet, let's talk. So, you know what I'm thinking? I'm going to take Avita to the cleaners. Avita. But instead of the cleaners, we went to Starbucks. And she wasn't impatient with me at all, and we sort of kind of hatched a plan. I said, Avita, what if we did a project that would demonstrate your skills, and would also look back at what happened to all those kids at Jefferson School and whether their outcome was as good as yours. So we hatched a plan, and we decided that we were going to do a project where we would go find as many of these people as we can. We're going to do this in two ways. One is we're going to touch the heart. We're going to find all these children and find out what happened to them, or as many as we can. But we're going to also look at this clinically. What did 6 years of intensive civic corporate involvement mean? And what can we learn from it? And why did it stop? I put in a recommendation for Avita at Channel 4, and lo and behold, she got the job there as an intern. So I think that what we do, journalism, should be compensated. I don't buy this. People essentially, freelance fees come to about, when you come down to it in the St. Louis market, come down to minimum wage when all is said and done for a serious story. So I said, we're going to crowdfund this. And I'm going to ask all my friends or anybody in sight who's heard of me or knows me, I'm going to ask them if they'll invest in Avita's work. And my formula was essentially, I want to pay Avita $20 an hour for the heavy lifting she's going to do in this story. I do not know how many hours it will be, but it'll probably at least 200. So I can't do the math, I'm in journalism, but I'll let you guys try to figure out how much that is. And so far, 55 people have donated anywhere from $20 to $500. So chapter 7 is Avita's story. And chapter 8 is my story. What else can we do? And then the third one is your story. How can we give journalists, writers, reporters, producers the right incentives to continue to do good work? Okay, so now we're coming to chapter 10, which is the commandment. Okay? Number 5 on the hit parade, honor thy father and thy mother. Why is it only number 5? I talked to my rabbi, and she says, well, here's what you need to understand. It's in the middle. It is the keystone. It makes everything else possible. And this I do believe. And Avita, stand up for a second, if you would. You may notice that there are some differences between us. The first thing you'll notice is that she's 5 feet tall and I'm 6 feet tall. I'm sure that's the first thing you notice. You'll notice that she's very young and I'm very old. You'll notice that she's a female and I'm a male. But here's what we have in common. After we talked, the one thing that we want to do more than anything in the world is to make our parents proud. Thank you very much, everybody.